Okay. So let's understand how the virtual object exactly works. What is meant by a virtual object, and how we can use the virtual object, and whether do we really use in real, or if we don't use, then what is a drawback and why we don't use that virtual object, why we don't prefer to virtual object. Okay. See, what happens is sometimes whenever we are automating an application, then certain objects may not be recognized properly. Some of the objects may not be recognized. When the object is not being recognized, not identifying, remember there is a difference between identification and recognizing. So identification means it's identifying the class and all. When we spy on that object, it is being identified and all. But due to certain property changes or due to dynamism of that particular object, dynamic nature of that object, then it's not being identified properly, not being located. That's called identification. Recognition means even when I use object spy, still that is not able to locate that object through spy also, not only through the script. While running the script, maybe if properties are all changed, then it may not be able to locate. But when you use spy, it will locate. Right? So that's called identification issue. But recognition issue, in a sense, even while you are using object spy, it is not able to identify, or it is not able to specify what class of object it belongs to. It's not able to spy on that particular object. It's not able to retrieve the information of the object. That's called recognition issue. So UFT is not able to recognize that there is some object in that place, that is object is there in the application. So in case if whenever you get any recognition issue like this, and you cannot generate the script, because that object cannot be retrieved by using descriptive programming and by using object repository. In both the situations you will not be able to retrieve, because even when you are using descriptive programming, what happens, you must have to understand what properties that particular object has got. But when UFT is not recognizing that, even when you are using object spy, it is not recognizing that, then you cannot fetch the properties and values, right? Okay, so when it is not recognizing with the spy, then descriptive programming is also not a solution. Many of the people say this answer. Okay, when the object is not being recognized, what will you do? Then some people answer, no, I will go with the descriptive. No, that is not the answer. When object is not being recognized, that means UFT is not able to understand what class of object it is, what technology it is. Then when it is not saying what technology it is, how can you define the properties, how can you define the class of it? Even in descriptive programming also cannot be done, right? So when object is not being recognized, then you cannot go with a traditional solution. You cannot go with a traditional solution or a traditional scripting. Then what we need to do? What we need to do in this case? So instead of going with the regular approach, like adding the object to the repository and using them, or going with the descriptive programming, then we need to use certain mechanism, or one of the mechanism called virtual object. That is not only the thing that what we do have. In case if object is not recognized, we have some other alternatives which we will discuss later. Okay, but one of the solution what we have is virtual object, in case if the object is not recognized. Then what is meant by virtual object? And virtual object is nothing but mapping an area where that object is located which is not recognized. Mapping an area as a standard class of object. Mapping an area as a standard class of object. See what I am saying here? I am not saying that mapping an unrecognized object to a standard object. I am saying that mapping an area as a standard class of object. So whenever you map an area, then you have to teach your tool, say that okay, I am going to map one area and map this area as a button, or map this area as a table, or map this area as certain object like this, or map this area as a checkbox. Okay. Now let us take one example here. Okay, so I opened Firefox browser. But what is the version of the Firefox browser here? It is 36. Okay. So when UFT has got some limitation in Firefox browser, it supports only till 32 version of the Firefox browser. But what I have right now is 36 version. Okay. Now let me spy on the objects. Let's say I have these objects like I have downloads, I have bookmarks, history, add-ons, sync, options. All these are the buttons. All these are buttons. Then let me resize to certain things. Okay, so I'm resizing it now here. When I use object spy, it is not recognizing the object. If you see that object is not being recognized properly. Okay. Now earlier I have defined as a virtual object, so it's added that object to the repository. So I'm just removing that. Now when I use object spy, it's not able to locate any of the object. If you see that, okay, when I spy on sync button, then it's not taking that. It is taking entire window. Then when I spy on add-ons button, still it is taking entire window. So that means it is not able to recognize that there is some object there where I spied. It's not able to recognize. This is called recognition issue. Now, how can I generate the script when it's not recognizing the object? If I try to add that object to the repository, it will add entire window. I cannot add that individual object. If I can't add that individual object, how can I perform the action on that? Got what I am saying here? So it cannot be done. If I record the script, and I am clicking on history button. When I click on history button, see what it is saying here. Instead of saying that I clicked on certain button there, it is saying I just clicked on window, that's it. It is not saying on which button I have clicked on. But it is giving certain coordinates. That means I performed certain click operation on that window on certain coordinates. Got what I am saying here? So this is what recognition issue. When the object is not being recognized, what happens is you will not be able to generate the script on that, because you will not be able to add the object to the repository. At the same time, you will not be able to write the descriptive programming also on that, because you cannot fetch any of the properties of that object and all. So even in descriptive programming also, you must have to define what class it is, and you must have to define some properties to identify that. It is again the regular identification mechanism it uses. But I still have to perform certain actions on these objects. What should be done now? Then what I will do is, whatever the area that I click on, so that area must be an object. It has to recognize it as an object. So that I can say click on history, or I can say that click on sync, or I can say click on some other buttons here. So each one, whatever is available in this, should be a button. Bookmarks or history, add-ons, sync, options, all these are buttons. So each one should be recognized as one button. Then what I have to do is to make them to recognize as a button. Then I need to use something called virtual object. Then how that virtual object can be used in UFT is, to use virtual object, go to tools, and can you see something called virtual object option? Then click on new virtual object, or you can go to virtual object manager, either one. So if you go to virtual object manager, generally virtual object manager stores all the virtual objects whatever created. So from manager you can click on new, or you can directly click on new virtual object there. So as soon as you click on new, then it is giving the virtual object creation wizard. It has got 4 steps. One is map the virtual object into a standard class. That means you have to map certain area and then you need to define that class of that area. Then define the boundaries of the parents and select the name of virtual object and then add to the collection. So it has got 4-step process here, and let's understand each process. The first process is just define what class you are trying to define here. Is it a button, or is it a table, or is it a list, or is it a checkbox, or a radio button, or it's a normal object? Now each one should be recognized as a button, right? Then select the button and click on next. Then what it is asking here? It is asking to mark the object. As soon as you click on mark, it is giving some plus icon, right? That means it is asking to map. Then history, first one is history. Map that area. I just marked one area. Now it is giving the width and height of that particular area, but internally it will take the coordinates. Click on next. Now we define the parent, under which parent that object has to be added. So that should be added, that object should be added under Firefox window. So the hierarchy will be like this: window, Firefox, and so on, so button it has to come. Then click on next and give the name of the button. What is that? History. Add to the collection, say Firefox buttons, some collection name you just give. It won't make any difference. It is just to store internally. Then say finish. Now what I have done is, I just marked one area and I marked that area as a button. I just asked my UFT, say define that area as a button. Then I gave the button name as history, since I am creating one user defined thing. And then close it. Now what I have done here, I just marked area wherever that history is there. Then I took that area and then that area is marked as a button class. Now let me use object spy on that area. So which one? History, right? But even after taking the icon onto the history, that means after taking that history through spy, but still it is not able to recognize that history. But that area is marked as an object, right? But still object spy is not recognizing that object. Spy is not recognizing that object. This is one of the drawback of using virtual object. Write down the drawbacks also. So drawback of using virtual object is, even though the area is marked as a virtual object, by using object spy we cannot locate the virtual objects. Even though this area, that area or these objects are marked as virtual objects, by using object spy we cannot we cannot locate the virtual objects. That means object spy cannot locate the virtual objects. One of the drawback. Okay, fine. I don't have any issue if it is not locating through spy. Okay, let it be, no problem. Let me try to add that object to the repository so that I can generate the script. Okay, so main window is already added. Let me delete that main window. Then add the history. This is virtual object, right? I have created, but which one it is taking? Main window. It is not still adding the virtual object. Second drawback it is. Write down. Virtual objects cannot be added to the object repository manually. Virtual objects cannot be added to the object repository manually. This is second drawback of using virtual object. But then how can I generate the script on that virtual object? How can I click? To add these objects to the repository, virtual objects, the only way what we have is record on these objects. Record on these objects. So objects can be added to the virtual objects can be added to the repository only through recording. Only through recording. Now earlier whenever I have recorded the script, when it was not mapped as virtual object, it was showing as window.click and clicked on certain coordinates. But now let's see what happens if I perform the same action while recording. Click on record and go to the application. Click on this. Stop it. Now what it is showing here? Window.virtual button. It's not showing like window.click and coordinates. So now it is showing that you have clicked on certain virtual object. Fine. The script is generated. Then let me run the script and see whether it will click on that button or not now. It will click on that button. We said so and so virtual button it has to click on. Script has been executed. But if you look at that, did it click? No. This is one more drawback. Here, write down the drawback point here. Tool cannot perform the actions on virtual objects if the application is hiding behind another application. Application is hiding behind another application. That means, okay, UFT can perform the actions on virtual objects only when the application is focused in front or when application is taken into front. Then only it performs the action on virtual object. Okay, and let's understand how exactly it is. Now when the application was hidden behind the tool and when I am running the script, it did not perform the action. Okay, so let me do one thing. While running, I will bring the application to the front and then I perform the action and see whether it will perform or not. Then how can you bring the application to the front? Set OWSH equals to, or you can use any variable name, variable there. So create object wscript.shell. Create object wscript.shell. Then OWSH.appActivate. Activate. Then what is mean by appActivate here? It will bring whatever the application title that we give, then it will bring the application to the front. We have learnt that in a wscript cell earlier. Then you provide the title here. What is the title? It is Mozilla Firefox start page. Then it says Mozilla Firefox start page. That's how the title has been displayed, right? Then after that, what I'm doing is I'm saying wait of 3. Just wait for 3 seconds after bringing to the front. Just run this. That's what app active means. It is bringing to the front. Now you can see that it is clicking on that virtual button. So you have to bring the application to the front, but if application is hidden in some other application or application is behind another application, then virtual object will not work. Right. Next, one more is here. Earlier this was the coordinate, right? I mean the application size was like this. Now what I am doing, I just maximized the application. When I maximize the application, then that particular object coordinate will be changing, right? It will change automatically. Now let me run the script and see whether it will still click on history button or it will click on a different thing. Okay, so it is clicking. So the coordinates are same here. Okay. But let me do one more thing here. I'm changing the system resolution. I'm changing the screen resolution to this. Okay, so let it be for now. Okay, so this is what it is. Let me run the code again. Did it click? It did not click now. What's the reason? Because when I changed the resolution, then application will be automatically resized as per the resolution that what we have set. So when the application is resized as per the resolution, then application may convert into large icons or small icons and text will be automatically converted. So that's what resolution set meant for. Right? So whatever the resolution I set in the system, then the browser will be automatically adjusted to that resolution. So when the browser or the application is adjusted to the resolution which is currently in the system, then the objects will be relocated to different coordinates. Now that particular button or history button coordinates have been changed because the resolution has been changed. So since the coordinates have been changed, then the virtual object is pointing to a different area than where that object is exactly located. This is another drawback of using virtual object. When the application resolution is changed or when the object coordinates have been changed or relocated to some other area, then virtual object will not work. So there are various disadvantages with this. Even though that is one of the good option for us, when the object is not recognized, then we can use virtual object. One of the solution is virtual object. So it is giving good option. I can work when even the objects are not being recognized. But still, we don't use this virtual object much because of these drawbacks. Coordinates must be same. Application resolution should not be changed. Application always should be in front while running the script, right? And I must have to record on these objects to add them to the repository. Lot of things, lot of conditions here. So this is what it is. Okay. Now let's see exactly how this works. But what is the exact use of virtual object? Let me change the resolution again. So screen resolution is being changed to this. Okay. So now I'm opening again virtual objects. So let me define another objects also. So another one is a button. Click on next. Then sync is another button. Okay, sync is another button. Then click on next and give the button as sync. Finish. Okay, this has to be added to the another collection. Okay, no problem, collection won't make any much difference. After adding the object to the repository, collection won't make any difference. Then bookmarks is another button. So I have to map this area. Click on next and then mark it as bookmarks. So add this to Firefox buttons. Finish it. And one more object is here. I will say as add-ons. Okay. Then it is add-ons. Finish it. Close it. So I have added. Next, what you can do is just record one step on each. Say bookmarks. Click on sync. And then click on add-ons. Okay, so I have clicked on all three buttons. So when I performed actions on all three buttons, those will be added to the repository. Once these objects are added to the repository, then whenever I need to click on, earlier it was not being recognized, right? So I have to think about coordinates, in which coordinates that add-ons is there. Then I say window.click and so coordinates I need to provide. Now I don't need to think of those coordinates and all. Then what I need to do is just say whenever I want to click on sync button, then I'll say window.virtual button sync.click. Then when you run the script, it must have to click on sync if you see that. But only precondition here is coordinates should have not been changed. Object is in the same coordinates where you have mapped. As soon as you add to that, if you see that those objects have been added to the repository as like virtual button and all, it is taking x, y coordinate, name and all. So name is nothing but whatever the name that you have given. So generally virtual object will have only these properties. It is taking y coordinate and x coordinate. But if you change these coordinates, then object recognition problem will come. So object is mainly recognizing here based on the coordinates. So that's why I told you have to map an area as a standard class of object. You got what is meant by virtual object now. So there are various drawbacks here, like application has to be in the front and application coordinates should not have been changed, right? Resolution should not have been changed. Then you must have to record at least once. Then what else you need to do here? Objects cannot be recognized by SPI. By using SPI you cannot locate the objects. You cannot add the objects manually to the repository and all. So due to these drawbacks and all, see, I cannot give guarantee that object will be in the same location every time in that application. Tomorrow they may change those add-in buttons and all, move on to the top, or they may change to one side. So in that cases, again I need to remap the objects, right? Again I need to remap the objects and I need to re-record on them. When I remap the objects, it will create one more virtual object. So see that, okay, I will not be able to, once I add the virtual object to the manager, then I will not be able to do any modification to that. I cannot remap that same object. Only thing is I have to delete that object and then I need to create one more object. But in the object repository, it's a different object, right? So again I need to re-record. To add the object which is re-added, then I need to record on that one more time. It's a drawback, right, for me? So that is the reason in real we don't use the virtual object at all. But only thing in terms of interview, what happens, okay, how we can answer is virtual object. In case if the object is not being recognized by the tool, then you can map that area where that object is located. So map that area as a standard class of object. So whenever you record on that object, then that object will be recognized as a button or list or anything whatever you have mapped. But in real, we don't do the recording. We don't go by coordinates and all because this will be keep changing, right? Or sometimes I might need to run the application in hidden mode. Okay. So this is one of the best example because these objects are not being recognized and these objects are there. Okay. So these objects are not being recognized properly. So I mapped those objects as virtual object. But once I record it, then I'm able to generate the script on these objects easily, right? So now when I click on add-ons, say virtual button, I will select add-ons dot click. It's clicking on add-ons button. So once I record on them, then it is easy for me to generate the script. Got the virtual object. Okay. So we'll stop here today.